Hey guys, so I finally got my hands on the new Leica M11 and I'm very excited because there aren't many Leica M11s around. In fact, not only did I get my hands on one, I got my hands on a silver chrome, which apparently are a lot more rare than the black chrome. I guess mainly because they are made of brass where the black chrome are aluminum, so they're maybe a little bit more desirable, I don't know, but I was very happy to get my hands on it. Now let me say this, when I first got the camera, I was skeptical. I'm like 60 megapixels, is there going to be ghosting? Is there going to be all kinds of digital noise? We've got a BSI sensor, how's that going to look in one of these things? What's the color science going to be like? No removable base plate anymore, now we've got a battery that pops out of the bottom. Is it too modern? Well, these were all things that definitely were weighing in my mind, and in some ways, I almost didn't want to love the camera because I'm like, it's a departure. The Leica had the rangefinder experience down for 62 years or 60 some odd years, and now they've changed up the equation. Yeah, the footprint of the camera is almost identical to the previous iteration, the M10R, whatever. But there are some fundamental changes. And when I first started shooting with it and I was looking at the different, the color science, I was like, I'm not really sold on this thing. And then as I started using it over a few days and then kind of going back and then picking up an M10R and then using this again and then picking up the M10R and then going into Lightroom and really digging in and looking at the files, I started seeing things in a whole new light. Literally. So I'm going to share with you guys a ton of images, some BTS, a couple of different photo shoots that I did, and then I'm going to give you a complete summary at the very end, and then my final conclusions. This video is brought to you by Squarespace, and you guys know how much I love Squarespace. In fact, I use it for my own website, adamlerner.net. If you want to save 10% on your website and domain, use the code ADAM at checkout, ADAM, and you'll save 10%.
All right, so it was an extremely snowy day, and I went to my friend's barber shop, and as you guys can see, I took a lot of different portraits. One of the things that I did notice off the bat is the color wasn't exactly what I'd hoped for. It seemed like almost like a peach tone in the skin, and the backgrounds kind of had a bluish purple tone. I did spend some time in Lightroom. I haven't quite figured out exactly where I want to be as far as getting the color adjusted. I did enjoy using the camera. I found it to be very comfortable and intuitive. But when I finally got the images back and looked at them in Lightroom, I realized that the colors are very different. And especially from what I was used to coming from an M10 or an M10R, where the images just seem to be a little bit warmer off the bat. So that's definitely going to take some getting used to. So I ended up doing black and white conversions of most of the photos. And in fact, if I were to present these photos, I would probably lean toward the black and whites. Even though I do like some of the color photos, I felt that the black and whites were a little bit more powerful. Obviously, it's based on lighting conditions, but just trying to deal with the color, I'm just not quite there yet, and I just need to spend more time with the M11 files and profiles and kind of developing my own way of managing the color. I think the black and white conversions came out really strong. I feel the files are nice and thick. There's plenty of detail, and I definitely think that both options work, and in this case, the black and white was really solid and probably my preference as well. So here I wanted to show you guys how much recovery there is with the M11 file. This file is straight out of camera right here. It was shot at 1/1500th of a second, and you can see it's wildly underexposed. So typically I would just mark this as a throwaway file. Now watch what happens when I bring the exposure up. Okay. That's 2 stops, 3, 4. That's 5 stops of recovery right there. How incredible is that? Now, we talked about the camera profile before. I'll just show you the M11 profile. In this case, I don't know. It's not something that hugely bothers me, but I still prefer the Adobe profile, and you can really see that difference right there, how much it seems to be warmer with the Adobe profile. I'll just kind of snap to the snapshots that I shot so I won't go through the whole editing process. So here's the color edit that I ended up doing. Not radically different, but you can see if we go to the before and after. I mean, it's like, in this case, it really is night and day. And one of the things that I talked about earlier with this set is I prefer the black and whites. So here's my black and white edit. I'll get rid of the info screen there. You can really see the difference. I mean, look at this. This was what I would previously have considered a throwaway file. And as a black and white, that's completely entirely usable. I mean, maybe it's not the best portrait I've ever shot, but it just shows you the remarkable capabilities of this sensor and how much recovery. I mean, that is 5 stops of recovery. A couple of days later, we had an unseasonably warm day, which was kind of awesome because it had been super frigid, and it was also very bright. And I was able to shoot wide open at f1.4 all day long with ISO 64. And I set the camera so that if the shutter were to be exceeded, it would go into the electronic shutter. And to give you an example, this next frame that I shot of the hood of the car, this was shot at 1/12,000th of a second, and it really looks good. Now, yes, there's that chance of rolling shutter. I didn't find that was a big issue for me. In fact, I think I only really noticed one image, and I point that out more at the end of the video. But for whatever reason, the images looked lit. Like, not like they were glowing, but they looked lit, like as if the car was being like purposely lit, not just with the sun. And I noticed that in a lot of the different photos that I shot with this camera, is that the BSI sensor, it just handles light differently. It seems to gather more light when it's not there. And you combine that with the 50 Summilux that I was using as well, that also has that effect of gathering more light. And it really makes the images pop. It gives the image a three-dimensional look. I love shooting wide open. If I have a 51.4 lens, I want to be at 1.4. And this lens on the M11 looked absolutely fantastic. The image quality was fantastic. I didn't get any kind of issues with noise. I didn't have any issues with chromatic aberration. There was just a ever so slight purple fringing that was so easy to mitigate. Just a little, click of the dropper and boom, it was gone. So as far as automotive shooting, as far as outdoor shooting, it really gets out of your way. You just have so much more flexibility. And I especially found that to be the case on this day. I will also say that it was incredibly frigid and the battery barely moved. I mean, I know that I shot probably collectively for, a couple hours outside. And I think when I got home, the battery was at like 95%, which is just unheard of. So really, really good experience with the camera shooting automotive outside. The menu system on this thing is fantastic. It's, like an SL2, SL2S, very intuitive. You have a lot more controls in here. The electronic level covers the entire sensor, whereas previously on like M10P and M10Rs, it would only be like kind of like a little kind of bit in the center of the screen. Now you've got the electronic level that goes across the entire length of the view of the screen in live view. Low light performance is fantastic. I did some comparative shooting with the M11 against the M10R. The M11 just appears to be brighter at the same ISOs, and it definitely retains a lot more detail. You've got the new sensor technology, which allows you to select between 60, 36, and 18 megapixels. This is something that doesn't really appeal to me. I don't see why I would ever want to use something like that myself. I tried messing around with it. It's not one of those things that I absolutely loved or saw a reason for my own shooting where I would be using it. I did do some lighting tests where I did some low light comparisons at 60 megapixels, 36 and 18, and I found that actually at the 60 megapixel setting, the highest DNG setting, that the images were a lot cleaner than the 36 and 18 megapixel settings, which I thought would be the opposite. I thought we'd have more dynamic range, but that could also just be when you start really pushing it in a low light setting,
that there's just not enough pixels firing or not enough light being gathered onto the sensor. It feels modern. It feels like a modern camera. It has like, it's probably mostly because of the battery compartment. You know, I do like this system that the SL and the Q2 and all those different cameras have. I think it's a really nice system, but I do miss the bottom plate. And the thing that bugs me about this is that you still have to take the battery out to get to the SD card. You know, but I don't know. Obviously, Leica wanted to keep the footprint, you know, the same, so I get that. The finish on the camera, I'm not entirely sold on it. I mean, I know that the silver one has the brass body, which a lot of people find to be more desirable, and the black one is the aluminum body and it's lighter weight. I haven't tried that one, so I can't comment on that. I had an M10P that had the silver chrome finish, and it just seems like this one is just more of a flat silver, whereas the M10P had like the black you know, the black flakes or the black specks in the paint. It just seemed a little bit more elegant, but that's really nitpicky kind of stuff. 60 megapixels, you know, if you have an M10R and you're at 40 megapixels and having the option to go to 60 megapixels, well, it gives you more reach. I don't know if I need 60 megapixels in my M body. It has yet to be seen. But I think it's a great thing that if you're somebody that needs to make massively huge prints, or you're somebody that does cropping, it just, those are things that are not necessarily things that I find reasons for me to need the M11. One of the things that I've noticed is with the color science, the files seem to be very magenta. And I don't know, or purple, I would say actually. You know, like if I go to the HSL and I remove some of the saturation in the purple, I feel like the files look a little bit better with purple taken out, meaning that when the file comes right in, it almost seems like the blacks are blacker, but I think it's only because there's just more purple. You can get the rolling shutter effect where you get like the weird kind of like bent lines and stuff like that because it is an electronic shutter. The M11 profile in Lightroom automatically connects with the camera. So when you pull the images in, the raw images, I don't know if that's necessarily a bad thing. I'm just not 100% sure that I love the M11 profile. Easy enough to change to the Adobe profile. The price point, you know, it's an expensive camera. Yes, there's a lot more technology in here. Yes, it's 60 megapixels. To be at $9,000 with no IBIS, it seems like a pretty high price point. If you're somebody that has like an M10 and you want a lot more resolution and you didn't buy an M10R, well, I'd say maybe skip the M10R. If you've got an M10R and you want to upgrade to the M11, well, you know, you're in a different spot because you've already got a lot of resolution. The difference though is the BSI sensor, it really is an incredible performing sensor, and you get a lot more, you just get a lot cleaner images, especially if you're somebody that shoots at high ISOs. So that wraps up my review of the Leica M11. If you guys have any questions or comments, please leave them below, and we'll see you soon.